learned about different parts of it. For the last 2 weeks I was gone, and Mr. Isaac taught you some lessons from the Bible. But before that, we learned some other things about forgiveness. And we'll review all that next week. So we've learned about different parts of the verse. Today, we're going to learn about this part right here. Starting right here and ending right there. 3 words. Can we say those 3 words? Forgiving one another. Say that again. Forgiving one another. We'll learn about forgiving one another and even some stuff around that too. Now this is the last picture of our last lesson about forgiveness. One day, Jesus was teaching. He was teaching a lot of different things. But he was teaching his disciples, and when he was teaching, did Jesus ever say anything that was the wrong thing? Did he ever make a mistake? No. No, he's perfect, right? He knows everything, so it wouldn't be like, sometimes I might say something and then say, oh, that was the wrong way to say that. I shouldn't have said that. I should have said something else. Because I'm a man. I'm a human being. But Jesus, he was a man. He was a human being, but he also was perfect, and that's because he is Jesus, and Jesus is God. So Jesus never made mistakes, and as he was teaching, he was saying different things. He was saying some things about how to be blessed, and then he started talking about the law of God. Some of you know some of the laws of God. Does anybody know? Can anybody tell me some of the? Really? Can anybody tell me some of the 10 Commandments? Tell me 1 or 2 of the 10 Commandments. Do you know one of the 10 Commandments, Serenity? Moses, yes, Moses is the one that received the 10 Commandments, and he wrote the books of the law. But can you tell me what there was 10 of them? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 commandments written on stone. God wrote them. And we've learned them before, but do we know them? Does anybody remember any of them? Moses, do you remember 1 or 2? Thou shalt not covet. That's right. That's one of them. Thou shalt not covet. Can anybody remember some of the other ones? The thou shalt nots. Thou shalt not. Can't remember it right now. Can you remember one? Thou shalt not steal. Yes, thou shalt not covet. Thou shalt not steal. There's 8 more. We don't have to do all of them. Alistair? Haven't read it in a while. Moses? Thou shalt not kill. Yeah, that's a commandment. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Several of them. So, Jesus was talking to his disciples about the law. He said, you have heard before that, listen here, you've heard before that if a person kills somebody, he should be judged before the judges and sentenced to death. And that's what the law said. The law said, thou shalt not kill, and said if a man were to kill someone else, if he was to disobey that law, he should die. Yes, that's what God says. God says if you kill somebody, you should die. And the disciples were sitting there listening, and I can imagine they were sitting there and thinking, well, I've never killed anybody. You think? Nobody here has ever killed anybody. And they were probably thinking, why is Jesus talking about killing somebody? We've never killed anybody. But then, some people do. That's why there's a law about it. But Jesus was talking to his disciples. But then, now listen to this. Jesus, and does Jesus ever make any mistakes when he says anything? No, he doesn't. Jesus said, you've heard about the law that you shouldn't kill, and if you do kill somebody, you should be brought before the judges and then die. But I say that if any one of you hates someone, is angry with his brother for no good reason, he is guilty. Whoa. Wrong. A sinner. said is guilty of the same thing. And I can imagine Peter was sitting there, and Peter's brother was sitting there too. How many of you have a brother or a sister? Yeah. Have you ever been angry with your brother or your sister? Yeah. So they was probably sitting there saying, angry? Well, I've been angry with my brother before. And I bet James was sitting there saying, there's times when John has made me really mad, and I lost my temper at him. Woo! How many of you ever lost your temper? That's being angry. That's sinful anger. Yeah, and so Jesus said, in fact, I say to you that if anybody says to someone else, well, they all knew that Jesus didn't just mean actual family brothers and sisters. He meant the rest of them, all 12 of them. They weren't all related. So Jesus was saying, if you're angry with someone, and there's no good reason for it, and especially if you were to lose your temper, there's never a reason to lose your temper, you're guilty. And he said, and if anyone calls somebody raka, now we don't use the word raka, but we know what the word raka meant. It meant empty head. Have you ever been so mad at somebody, you called them names? Jesus says that's sin. Jesus says that's sin. And they said if you call somebody a fool, say you fool, which means that you think they're an evil person, it says you're guilty of hellfire. Now I used the term, and actually me and Mrs. Owen saw this place just last week. But there was a place in their land, listen to me, let me tell the story. When there was a place in their land where back then they didn't have garbage trucks like we do that carried, they took their garbage out to a big valley and they burned it. Well, there were so many people in the area, the fire always burned. And it was a place that stunk. If an animal died, they would dump the animal there. If just the sewage from the city, they would dump that there. And then the garbage that they had, all of it, and it was always burning, continually burning. The fire never went out. It was an awful, defiling place. And God said, Jesus said, yeah, that's like a dead animal. Jesus said that, and that was just a picture of real hell. Jesus said that if you call somebody raka, you should be called before the judgment. Like somebody who's murdered says if you call somebody a fool, an evil person, and it's just because you're angry with them, you deserve to go to hell. Now, I've heard people say, I hate that person. What does Jesus say about that? He says that's sin. Should people that are Christians, should they hate somebody? Our verse says, be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another. If somebody does something wrong to you, should you hate them or should you forgive them? The Bible says forgive them. That's right. And I'll bet that the Jesus disciples were thinking, oh my, I've lost my temper before. I've said something mean about my friend or my brother, and I'm going to be judged for that. And he would be judged, and we will be judged for the things we say. How will anybody be able to? Everybody's guilty. Jesus said, here's what you should do. All of you, sometimes, will be taking your offering, you'll be taking an offering to give as a sacrifice in the temple. And if you go there and you remember that you've done something wrong to somebody else, or somebody is, you're angry with somebody because of something they've done to you, he said you should leave your offering there and go and get it right and then come back. Now, we don't bring offerings to the temple anymore, but the disciples, they knew exactly what they meant, what Jesus meant. What they would do, they would have an offering. We talked about this when we talked about the tabernacle and all that. They brought a sheep, to the temple to offer, and they would have their sheep. See this man? He's got his sheep, he's got a little rope tied around it, and he's standing there. There was a big courtyard where they would all wait their turn to have their sacrifice offered on the altar. These men, they couldn't offer their own sacrifice. They needed a priest to do it. So they're standing there, and when you see this big railing, right? So they're standing there, and he's waiting by the railing, waiting for a priest to come and take his offering and sacrifice it on the altar. And what is he doing? Can you tell what he's doing right here? What's it look like he's doing? Serenity? He's thinking. He's thinking. And he's standing there thinking, and what does he remember? He remembers that somebody did something wrong to him, and he's angry about it. What does Jesus say? Does Jesus say, go ahead and offer your sacrifice? No. He says, leave your sacrifice there. Now what will happen if the man just leaves his sacrifice? He just ties him to the post and walks away. You think somebody else might come along and take his sacrifice? It could happen. Maybe it wouldn't happen. What should he do? Should he leave his sacrifice there where somebody else might come and take it? Or should he go ahead and sacrifice it and then take care of it later with the person that he's angry about? Jesus says, leave it there and go find the person. Now, do you think the person might not live in the same city? Maybe not. But Jesus said, if you bring an offering to God, God doesn't want that offering if you are angry with your brother. It says, leave your offering there, go and make it right with your neighbor, and then come back and give an offering. Now we don't do offerings like this. But when you go to church on Sundays, or even here, when we sing, some of our songs are worship. They're offerings of worship to God. And God doesn't want those offerings to worship if we are angry with the other kids that are at Bible Club, or if we're angry with people at home. God doesn't want those things. What does God want us to do? He wants us to be forgiving one another, right? Now, how long does it take to forgive somebody? Does it take a really long time to forgive somebody? It doesn't take it might take a long time to find a person and say, something wrong happened, but I forgive you. Or, I did something wrong, please forgive me. Right? But it doesn't take long to forgive. Jesus said to the disciples, he said, and there's another situation. That's talking about God's law, but let's just say you were going through your life and you did something and you didn't think it was wrong, but your neighbor thought that you did something wrong to them, and they want to bring you to court. Jesus said, it's better to go to that neighbor and make things right between you. Because if you don't, the neighbor is going to take you to court, and the judge is going to hand you over to the jailer, and the jailer is going to put you in prison, and you won't leave until you've paid everything. So what is Jesus saying? He's saying, better not to go to court. If I do something wrong, if I do something and Mr. Isaac thinks I did something wrong to him, and he says, I'm taking you to court, much better for me to go to Mr. Isaac and say, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do something wrong. What did I do? And then I find out that I did do something and say, well, I am so sorry. Please forgive me. What can I do to make it right? Way better. Is that easy to do? Is it easy to say, I was wrong? Please forgive me. Is that easy? No. Saying the words is easy, but what those words mean is hard. It's hard to say, I was wrong. I sinned against you. Please forgive me. But that's what God wants us to do all the time. He wants us to be kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another. What does it take to be forgiving somebody? It takes somebody else saying, I was wrong. Please forgive me. You know? We should not, if we are learning anything at Bible Club today, we should not be going out of here saying, I hate that person. That person might be a mean person. That person might do something wrong to you. But the verse says, forgiving one another. You might be a mean person. You might do things that are selfish. You might do things that are just for yourself. And when you think back about it, you think, oh my, I did that all for myself. That other person got upset at me, and really they were right for getting upset at me. I was wrong. What should you do? You should go to that person. Maybe it's at school. Maybe it's somebody you ride on the bus with. I don't know. But if you did wrong to somebody, Jesus says, go to that person and say, I was wrong. Please forgive me. And if somebody comes to you and says, I was wrong, please forgive me, what should you do? You should say, I forgive you. You might not forget about it, but when you remember what they did to you, you also remember that they came along later and said, please forgive me, and you said yes. So if somebody does something wrong to you, and then you forgive them, when you remember the wrong thing, you should always remember the forgiving thing also. So, Jesus told his disciples something that was hard to do. In another time, he told them this. We talked about this the last time. Remember, Peter asked how many times he should forgive somebody?
Yeah.
Remember what Jesus said?
Yeah.
490 times? Did Jesus want us keeping track, or did he just want us always to forgive? Always to forgive. And it's not easy. It's easy to say those words, but what those words means, I was wrong. Please forgive me. Or somebody comes and says I was wrong, and you're like, that's all? All he has to do is say, I was wrong, please forgive me, and I have to forgive him? Well, if they stole something from you, they should give it back. But if they said bad words, if they were just mean to you with their words, and they said, I was wrong, please forgive me, then Jesus wants you to forgive them. And so, this is something that we all can do. Because all of us make other people mad and upset. And all of us have other people that make us mad and upset. And Jesus wants us, if we're obeying him, to be kind, to work our hardest not to upset other people, to be tender-hearted, and if other people upset us, we should be forgiving one another. Why? Because God, for Christ's sake, has forgiven us. That's right. So next week, we are going to review all of our lessons. And it's good because we had 2 weeks without these lessons. We'll put them all together next week. And remember one more thing about forgiveness. How does God provide forgiveness for us? Does God just look at our sin and say, oh, it wasn't a big deal? Is sin a little deal? No, it is a big deal. So how can God forgive us if we've sinned? We're going to talk about that next.